County, Georgia, a pair of hunters are quietly making their way through a dense thicket of trees.
Two hunters are out in the woods, walking along, looking for deer.
There's a layer of fern across the ground that is about a foot high, so you don't actually see your feet. You're wading through these ferns.
The vines are thick, they got somewhat disoriented, and one of them trips.
Oh, gosh. You all right? Yeah, I just got tangled on some vines.
God, what is that?
Looks like an old animal bones.
That's no animal bones.
They look down and they realize it's a human skull.
When 22-year-old California native Ardina Carter arrived on the campus of Georgia Southern University in the fall of 2001, it was the culmination of a journey that not only brought her across the country, but brought her to the doorstep of a whole new life.
Ardina was an individual who lifted herself out of a cycle of poverty out of Los Angeles.
We grew up in what you call the hood, South Central. We all wanted something better for her than what we had. That's when we started putting this plan together that she was going to go away to school.
She had achieved a lot in her young life, being a recipient of a scholarship, traveling across the country.
After earning a bachelor's degree in biology from Howard University, Dina, as her friends and family called her, decided to pursue a master's in education at Georgia Southern, located in the tiny town of Statesboro.
I was kind of leery for her to go that far away. I knew she could handle it.
We knew that anything that she set her mind to, that she would do.
Longing for a spiritual home, Dina became an active member of the Agape Worship Center.
Every time the doors of the church was open nearly, she was there.
It seemed to be a rock for her. It seemed to ground her and give her the support like a second family that she needed.
While Dina thrived at her new church, she still craved someone with whom to share her life.
She was in a situation where she was young, she was attractive, and she did meet men.
They were all infatuated with her because she was so dark and pretty.
But it wasn't until Dina met 26-year-old Ryan Clark in January of 2002 that sparks truly began to fly.
She met Ryan at Statesboro High School. He was a teacher at the school, and she was there substituting.
Hey, how you doing? Can I come in?
Good, sure.
Dina worked part-time as a substitute teacher to earn some extra cash while putting herself through grad school.
You really inspire these kids.
No, that's you. You inspire me. I'm just a substitute teacher, so.
Don't sell yourself too short.
Ryan was very outgoing, always making things happen, compassionate.
They hit it off. Ryan was a very nice guy.
They started to hang out together a little bit, started to get to know each other. It seemed that it may have been a little more serious to her than it was to him.
With Ryan hesitant to take the relationship to the next level, it soon hit a dead end.
They were together for a while, and from there, it fizzled out.
Dina may have wanted a little more out of the relationship, and so at some time, they terminated that relationship, but it seemed to be an amicable termination. There was no overall hard feelings.
Though she was disappointed, the breakup didn't stop Dina from achieving her goals. She threw herself into her studies, giving her all both in and out of the classroom.
She also worked at the Boys and Girls Club in Statesboro, tied back to her interest in the educational field.
She was like a counselor type, help with homework, that kind of thing at the school program.
So she had a very active and full schedule.
And when a chance encounter led Dina to 22-year-old Statesboro native Michael Natson, Dina wasn't sure she had time for romance.
Hey, you dropped some.
Oh, gosh, I'm all over the place today.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
But Michael quickly changed her mind.
You look like you got a lot going on there. You mind if I help you out with this?
Oh, thank you.
You mind if I walk with you?
Yeah.
Michael was a local from here in Statesboro, and he had joined the U.S. Army Reserves and was an MP, military police.
She told me he was a nice person. He was going to the same school that she was going to. He was working in computers.
They were attracted, they liked each other, and they would go out. And she called him her boyfriend.
But in February of 2003, Michael's obligations to the military created an unforeseen obstacle in their path to romance.
Michael was assigned at Fort Benning for the National Guard. He had been activated. Fort Benning is on the Georgia-Alabama border, and we're over here closer to the South Carolina border.
Dina thought that Michael being active duty in a way would cause a strain on their relationship.
But Michael assured Dina they could pull off a long-distance relationship.
I really don't like the idea of you being so far away.
I won't be that far away. I'll be up here all the time. You'll get tired of seeing my face.
You promise?
Of course.
Though Dina was afraid their busy lifestyles would make the long-distance relationship even harder, the couple still managed to make time for each other.
They would often go back and forth to see each other, and they were still trying to make things work.
What Dina and Michael didn't realize was that their fledgling romance would be the catalyst behind one of the most shocking crimes South Georgia had ever seen. A twisted tale of love and betrayal that would wind its way to the dense forests on the edge of town, to a mysterious discovery made one cold December day.
No one can get in contact with her. Her friends and family go immediately into search mode.
By the fall of 2003, 24-year-old grad student Dina Carter's plan for her life was all coming together.
She was going to church. She was working at the Boys and Girls Club.
She had a very full life. She was extremely busy.
She was on her path. She was doing everything that she wanted to do.
On top of that, she had seemed to found love in the arms of a Statesboro native named Michael Natson.
She was very much looking forward to what life was going to bring for her.
But a series of events is about to send a shockwave of fear through the entire community. For Dina's family back in California, it begins with a phone call on September 18th.
Hello?
I got a call from Dina's professor saying, have I seen her? I had to call my mom and tell her our baby was missing.
We started worrying about what was going on with her.
They became concerned, and they reported Ardina missing to the police department in Statesboro, Georgia.
During that conversation with police, Dina's family reveals a piece of information that raises the stakes of her disappearance.
Ardina was pregnant at the time, and that caused her family to have an extra level of concern.
Their baby was due December 25th.
She was real happy to be a mother. She found out it was a girl.
She's throwing around names, and she finally settles on Destiny Nicole. It was an exciting time.
It was June when she told me she was 4 months pregnant. That's when I said, what's his name? Who is he? She was telling me that it's Michael.
Her family explains that she does have a long-distance boyfriend, Michael Natson, but he lives at Fort Benning.
Dina's family also informs detectives that she doesn't have a car.
She had to depend on friends for rides, or she simply walked to college and walked to work. Here she was, a pregnant young lady, walking, trying to get around, and that would be a very significant factor in a missing persons case.
With not only Dina's life, but the life of her unborn child on the line, Statesboro PD, along with Georgia Southern's University Police, begin an immediate search.
One of the primary steps we would do is check her residence. When we entered the residence, it's very neat. Nothing really out of place.
There was no suitcase packed, nothing like she had grabbed anything to go on a trip. Everything just looked like you would expect it to look.
After we check her residence, we go to her work.
The Boys and Girls Club was very informative. They helped us out a lot. They knew Ardina, and from time to time, Ardina might have been late to work at the Boys and Girls Club. However, she was always there. She was consistent, but it really bothered them when she didn't pick up her paycheck. That's when they knew that something was up.
Speaking with Dina's co-workers, police are able to determine Dina's movements in the hours before she vanished.
So around September 11th, Dina left work, dropped off at home by one of her co-workers.
You know if she had any plans that night?
Well, she told me that she wanted to go to the library. I offered to give her a ride, but she told me she'd rather walk.
She was supposed to go to work the next day at the Boys and Girls Club, and she had arranged for a friend to pick her up. But the friend arrived that morning and no Ardina. Ardina Carter had told the last person that saw her alive that she was going to the library.
We checked the library video surveillance and were not able to place her ever having arrived at the library.
Unfortunately, young college students do make an attractive target.
We knew something had happened to her.
With neither Dina's apartment nor the library offering any clues to her whereabouts, on September 19th, police reach out to her boyfriend, Michael Natson, who was in Fort Benning on active military duty.
Michael Natson was assigned to a military police company at Fort Benning, Georgia.
They contacted the Army's Criminal Investigative Division.
Michael tells military investigators that he's been on base the last few days, and he hasn't even spoken with Dina for a while.
With Michael unable to offer any additional information regarding Dina's whereabouts, investigators find themselves at a crossroads. So on September 26th, 8 days after Dina was first reported missing, Statesboro PD and Georgia Southern University Police decide it's time to call in more resources.
The Statesboro Police Department did a very good initial investigation, but it was clear that there were no more viable leads in Statesboro. So they wanted to try to broaden their investigative scope. So they contacted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
It could be a murder. It could be a kidnapping. We didn't know, but we knew we had to start looking. We had to start doing what it would take to find Ardina Carter.
It's been 8 days since 24-year-old Dina Carter was reported missing. And though the Statesboro and Georgia Southern University police have been working around the clock, they're still no closer to finding her.
After Ardina was missing, the police department did not find any signs of foul play.
Detectives know that she has a long-distance boyfriend who's in the military and is presumed to be the father of her unborn baby, but he's been based at Fort Benning, which is about 200 miles away.
At this point, Statesboro police decide it's time to contact the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for help and extra resources.
Authorities in Statesboro, along with Dina's family and friends, hope the GBI's additional manpower will jumpstart an investigation that seems to be stalling out.
When they find out that a young, pregnant college student is missing, I think that perked everyone's ears and they sort of became invested. Where is this young lady?
What our fear was that she may have been kidnapped.
After the GBI came into the case, they re-interviewed some of the key witnesses.
One of her close friends had indicated to us that it was not uncommon knowledge that Ardina was pregnant with Michael Natson's baby.
The fact that he's on active duty at Fort Benning seems to suggest that he didn't have anything to do with it. But GBI agents still want to talk with him.
We went over and we met with him, and we started asking questions.
Hi, Michael. We are investigating the disappearance of Ardina Carter.
Speaking with Michael, investigators realize that while friends and family claim he is the father of Dina's baby, their relationship is not as strong as they might have thought.
It's our understanding you two were in a relationship?
Yeah, that's true. Or we were. We broke up back in February. We both tried to make the relationship work, but the long distance was just too hard for us.
With him gone, 3.5 hours away roughly to Columbus from here, it was a situation where, according to Michael, they then decided mutually to break off their relationship.
As for the idea that Michael is the father of Dina's baby, he says that can't possibly be true.
No, sir, that's impossible.
He says they were never sexually intimate.
The impression that Michael Natson gave that this was a very casual relationship.
He was very adamant that his life was in Fort Benning and he never had sex with Dina. Wasn't his child. Don't know why she would say that.
Listen, I thought the world of Dina, and I hope she's okay, but I'm completely happy here at Fort Benning, and I'm in another relationship right now.
He had met another young lady, Carrie, and that he and Carrie were involved in a romantic relationship. He was only seeing Carrie at the time.
Michael tells GBI investigators he isn't 100% sure who the father of Dina's unborn baby is, but he suspects it might be her old flame, Ryan Clark.
He says we need to look at Ryan Clark. Ryan Clark's the guy that she was dating.
All right, well, thanks for your time. We'll be in touch.
Investigators return to Statesboro and continue their interviews. Among these people are the congregation of the Agape Worship Center.
They came to the church, interviewed everybody.
One of the first people investigators speak with is Dina's close friend, Diane Budget.
Could you tell us about her personal life?
Let's just say Dina didn't have a hard time getting a date. I mean, she was funny and gorgeous. Guys just kind of flocked to her.
Dina did like attention from men. She was not shy around men.
She had something about her that men were attracted to her.
And according to Diane, Dina wasn't dating just one man. She was seeing both Michael Natson and Ryan Clark. But Diane claims the two relationships couldn't have been more different.
Michael claims that they hadn't consummated the relationship, and according to Diane Budget, that was almost the exact opposite relationship she had with Ryan Clark.
She is having a sexual relationship with Ryan.
Investigators originally assumed Dina had been exclusive with Michael Natson. But after speaking with Diane Budget, investigators decide it's time to also speak with Ryan Clark.
The Statesboro Police Department locates Mr. Clark.
Ryan tells us that he's married, he's moved on from Ardina, he's started a new life.
Let's cut to the chase. We understand that you and Dina were having an affair.
Not at all.
He also says that it was an insignificant relationship. It was nothing serious. They dated a little, but nothing more than friends.
He claimed that they were not intimate and that Ardina had pretty much moved on, still maintaining him as a friend.
Look, I know what you're thinking, but we were just good friends.
Furthermore, Ryan says he's heard around town that Dina is dating someone else and suggests investigators should be looking at him instead.
We have two guys pointing the finger at each other. Neither supposedly involved with the victim who we have discovered is several months pregnant.
Ryan, are you the father? Or were you continuing to have a relationship with her and no one knows about it? Michael, are you as involved as she claims you are and as others claim you are?
In an effort to uncover the truth, investigators put the full court press on both men. But when they do, they're left with more questions than answers.
He takes the polygraph, and it comes back inconclusive.
This case is just getting stranger by the minute. Investigators are starting to wonder, what is really going on here? Who is telling the truth?
It's now been over 2 weeks since Georgia Southern grad student Dina Carter went missing. And despite the best efforts of 3 police agencies, there is still no sign of the 24-year-old mother-to-be.
It was just so unbelievable. There has to be some explanation.
Detectives now feel Dina's personal life may hold the key to solving the mystery.
There were allegations that she was involved in relationships with 2 individuals, Ryan Clark and Michael Natson.
These are the only 2 players that we can tie in with any connection to her during this time period.
Both Michael and Ryan deny being sexually intimate with Dina, and both claim the other is the one police should really be speaking to, which makes investigators wonder if both men have something to hide.
Both of these guys have other women in their lives. Ryan's married, and Michael has a new girlfriend. So maybe Dina's disappearance did have something to do with her pregnancy.
When we get stories from 2 different people that are saying 2 different things, we try to nail down the facts of each part of those stories.
Investigators start with Ryan Clark.
They offered polygraph to Ryan, and Ryan takes the polygraph.
It comes back inconclusive.
Faced with the murky results of the polygraph, police press Ryan for more answers.
Are you ready to tell me what's really going on?
He claimed that they had never had any type of relationship together. However, that was not in fact true. They had been intimate.
Things aren't looking good for you at all, Ryan.
Okay, I'll be honest. Right before I got married, me and Dina were hooking up, but that was over a year ago.
Why don't you just tell me that?
I was afraid my wife was gonna find out.
Police have to wonder if this guy's now married and Dina is pregnant, could he be the father? And what could he have done to protect his secret?
But Ryan insists he had nothing to do with Dina's disappearance.
Where were you on September the 11th?
I was with my wife, you can call her.
We had to have a fairly uncomfortable conversation with his wife, and she did in fact verify he was home with her.
With Ryan seemingly in the clear, investigators turn to a piece of evidence their forensic unit has uncovered at Dina's apartment.
I think you should look at these.
Dina had made a pillow with Mr. Natson's image and his name. on it.
This pillow was painted with words describing Michael like honest, sweet, and caring.
To police, this very much seemed like a woman who was still deeply in love with Michael Natson. It's not the sort of thing that you would expect to see 7 months after an alleged breakup.
In addition to searching Dina's apartment, GBI investigators also pull her phone records from the night she disappeared.
We were able to triangulate time of the phone call and which cell tower it hit. And that cell tower was in Cobbtown, Georgia, which is roughly on the route between Statesboro and Fort Benning.
Which means Dina was either going to or coming from the area where Michael Natson resides.
And since Dina didn't own a car, it's unlikely she was alone. On October 2nd, 2003, 21 days since Dina's disappearance, the GBI and Georgia Southern University Police decide to pay Michael Natson another visit.
Hey, Michael. Michael?
We went in and we began to talk to him about that image on the pillow. This was more than just a casual acquaintance. This was a partnership that was going to happen between she and Michael Natson. It looked like they were building a life together.
This time around, Michael offers up a much different description of Dina than he did in his initial interview.
She was obsessed with me.
Michael said that she just refused the breakup, refused that he would have nothing to do with her, just constantly after him, on the border of harassing, calling, and just would not take no for an answer.
We asked him, when did you see Ardina Carter last? And he tells us he was home on leave at the beginning of September, and he believed it was about the 2nd or 3rd of September 2003 when he saw her.
Ardina had confronted Michael about the pregnancy and his level of involvement as far as their child, and that escalated into an argument between the two.
Michael, why aren't you answering my calls? We need to talk.
Man, what do you want, man? Leave me alone.
You can avoid me all you want, Michael, but this baby is yours.
That baby is not mine, and stop spreading them lies.
Michael, you taking care of this baby.
Did you hear that?
Michael, where are you going? Get back here, Michael!
That's part of the message that he was trying to give to the investigators, that they were not close, that he did not have any ties to this baby, therefore he didn't have to be responsible.
Michael is adamant he never spoke to Dina after September 3rd. That's when investigators confront Michael with Dina's cell phone records from the night she disappeared.
So where exactly were you on September 11th? And why does Dina's phone ping in the tower near where you live?
I was at color guard practice from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'm normally pretty tired after that, so I just went home and crashed. If Dina was in the area, I didn't see her.
We begin to realize that there's gaps in time. Once we begin to get specific answers and specific information, we begin to have something that we can talk to others about to verify that information. We learned that the color guard practices were only half a day. We, in fact, had no accountability of him during the time from about noon on the 11th until 8 a.m. on the 12th. We knew we had a very wide window of time that he could return to Statesboro and make his presence known to Ardina and then travel back to Columbus. It was obvious that something was amiss here.
We got the warrant for his Jeep. We're going to do a forensic search of his vehicle. While we were waiting on the tow truck, Agent Sullinger strikes up a conversation with Michael.
Do you own any firearms?
Yes, sir, I do. I actually own a 9mm.
You mind if I see it?
Yeah, I'll go get it. Thanks.
He goes and gets it, and he hands it to me. It was a Sig Sauer.
You mind if I take this with me?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Natson voluntarily gave the firearm to him, as if there was nothing to it.
But when detectives take a closer look at Michael's gun, they make an unsettling discovery.
It was a gun that was capable of holding 8 rounds. It had 7 in it.
When a magazine holds 8 and you're missing 1, that's an odd occurrence. That would indicate that a firearm has been discharged.
Why would a trained officer have a gun 1 round short?
Though investigators increasingly believe Michael Natson may be responsible for Dina's disappearance, they are no closer to locating her. A fact that weighs heavily on Dina's friends and family.
We knew she was pregnant, and we knew she wasn't getting medical care. And we knew that the baby was due.
It's still going on. No real leads to what's going on. They're just looking.
As days pass and Dina's due date draws closer, her loved ones pray for a miracle. But soon, a disturbing discovery in the woods will threaten to shake their faith forever.
I got a call and said they found a body. They wasn't sure who it was.
I'd lost faith in humanity and the justice system because I didn't think that they were going to get him.
The case of missing mother-to-be Dina Carter has brought investigators to Fort Benning, Georgia, and to the doorstep of Dina's ex-boyfriend, Michael Natson, who they believe may have something to do with her disappearance.
It seemed like there were gaps in his story, and in fact, Dina's phone records did show that she was traveling in the direction of Fort Benning the night she vanished. So the question now becomes, did he see her that night, or did something else happen?
When the GBI served the warrant to obtain the Jeep that Mr. Natson owned, they asked him if he owned any firearms. Mr. Natson agreed that he did, and thereafter provided a 9mm pistol. What's important about that pistol is when they opened or looked in the magazine, there was one bullet missing.
Desperate for more information linking Michael to Dina's disappearance, investigators obtain his cell phone records. What they reveal is eye-opening.
We were able to figure out that Michael Natson's cell phone had traveled from Columbus, Georgia, all the way down to Statesboro and back again in the early morning hours of September 12th, 2003.
In light of this discovery, investigators now believe Michael and Dina were traveling together on the night she disappeared. But what happened from there is still anyone's guess.
There was no blood in his car. There was nothing to indicate foul play in his vehicle.
There's no body. There's no nothing.
We cannot find any crime scene. We don't have a body. We don't know for sure what may or may not have happened. We're just at a wall.
10 long weeks pass, and it now seems the mystery surrounding Dina Carter's disappearance will remain just that. Then in mid-December, there's a shocking discovery.
On the morning of December 16, 2003, some gentlemen were at Fort Benning. They had obtained a permit to hunt at Fort Benning, and they were in the wooded area off of a roadway.
They had strayed way out of their area where they were allowed to be, and they found a human skull.
They didn't know what to do at first and eventually called police.
Due to the fact that this person was killed on a military base, the FBI has jurisdiction and it becomes a federal crime.
The investigators think, well, this could have been someone that's been buried for decades. This could be an old grave site. But then they find the fetal remains.
Dina was not only missing, but she was pregnant.
This touches everybody and it sets off alarm bells.
I think this might be our Statesboro woman.
As news spreads of the horrific discovery, Dina's friends and family fear for the worst.
Trying to hang on. Trying to hope it wasn't, you know, as a mother, you have the dream that she's gonna walk in the door in a minute.
We were yet holding on to hope that hopefully this is not her. We're just praying, Lord, please don't let it be her. But something on the inside, you know, you take a breath of air and saying, but it might be.
While friends and family hope and pray the remains don't belong to Dina, forensic experts begin processing the scene.
Based upon the fact that the body had completely been skeletonized, we were able to determine that it had been present there for at least several weeks, if not several months.
When the skull is turned around, in the back of the head, there is a hole, which the forensic anthropology immediately recognizes as a bullet wound.
At that point, once it was determined that this person was the apparent victim of a homicide, the body was taken to a laboratory, and they used dental records to determine and confirm her identity as Ardina Carter.
We found out about 4 days before Christmas.
I can't even describe the ache in my body that I felt.
Worst day of my life. She was my best friend. She was everyone's best friend.
For investigators, the location of Dina's remains tells them all they need to know.
It was an area that Michael Natson knew about, that he was familiar with, and that he could get to without having to go through the main garrison area of the post.
We know in our heart of hearts who did it. Everything points to Michael.
But can they tie Michael's weapon to Dina's murder? 3 months after 24-year-old Dina Carter's disappearance, investigators have recovered her remains, along with those of her unborn child, from the woods on the outskirts of the U.S. Army base at Fort Benning, Georgia.
The people that controlled the access to those areas was the MPs. And Michael Natson was an MP.
The FBI initiated its grid search, where they actually line out the area to be searched, go through on hands and knees with rakes, whatever it would take throughout this vegetation to locate a projectile or shell casing.
We wanted to research the area, make sure we hadn't missed anything initially.
They discovered a 9mm shell casing, which piqued my interest because the gun that Michael Natson had provided me in the past was, in fact, a 9mm.
But will this casing be the match they need to prove Michael Natson is responsible for Dina's murder?
The shell casing was sent to the FBI laboratory.
Finally, detectives received the news they'd been waiting for.
They were able to make a match that the shell casing that was found at the scene where Ardina Carter's body was found is, in fact, a shell casing fired from the 9mm pistol that Michael Natson owned.
In June of 2005, Mr. Natson was indicted for murder, for feticide, and within a week of the indictment, Mr. Natson was arrested.
It isn't long before news of Michael's arrest reaches Dina's family and friends.
That was the first time I kind of smiled, because I said, we got you. We got you.
I felt very vindicated. I felt like my sister's death was not going to be in vain. I felt like someone would pay for this.
We were successful in denying him bond. Given the heinous nature of the crime, it was the appropriate decision.
With Michael Natson behind bars, federal prosecutors work to build their case against him. But they're thrown a curveball when the results come back on the paternity test conducted on Dina's unborn child.
The test came back 97% or 96% probability that Michael was the father. The court only recognizes, I think, 98 or 99%. So that wasn't allowed to be a part of the testimony that it was his baby.
Prosecutors worry this information might serve to undermine their case. But a few months before Michael Natson's trial is set to begin, the FBI receives news from the Muskogee County Jail that changes everything.
When people do something that's heinously terrible, like take the life of another person, they really do have a need to get it off their chest. And we learned that Michael had actually told people that he was in jail with about the details of killing Ardina Carter.
I had this chick, she was just supposed to be a fling, right?
Mr. Natson not only confessed to the murder, but explained some different facts about the murder that only the murderer would know.
To do what I had to do, man.
When the FBI sits down with one of the informants, the truth about Dina Carter's final hours is revealed.
In Michael's eyes, Dina was really just a fling. And when she got pregnant and started telling everyone in Statesboro that she was having his baby, Michael did not appreciate that.
Mr. Natson admitted that he had had sex with her and she'd gotten pregnant and she wouldn't go away.
Michael!
He also had the opportunity of a new relationship in Columbus, Georgia. So he felt himself boxed in, I believe.
He did not want this child or the obligations that went along with fatherhood. He told his fellow inmates the only solution was to get rid of her. He said he had picked up Dina the night of September 11th and convinced her to drive to Fort Benning by telling her that he had bought a car for her.
So you really got me a car?
Of course. Can't have the woman carrying my baby walking around.
Oh, Michael. So you're really going to be there for us?
Yes.
However, the informant says Michael never took Dina to a car. Instead, he drove her to a remote wooded area on the outskirts of Fort Benning.
Why did you stop here?
Oh, I found the spot the other day. I wanted to show you.
Okay.
Get out. Come check it out.
Okay.
When he and Ardina had gotten to Fort Benning, he got her out of the car. And when she looked away, he shot her in the head. And dragged her then into a ditch near the side of the road. Mr. Natson had shared with him that he had gone back to the scene after the murder and tried to police his brass. Essentially, policing your brass is cleaning up the shell casings when you fire a weapon. But he was unsuccessful.
It fit perfectly with things which legitimized their testimony.
They were able to fill in the blanks and answer the questions as to why the shell casing was where it was and why the body was where it was and how he lured her there in such a desolate area.
This new information further solidifies prosecutors' confidence in their case against Michael Natson. And on March 3rd, 2007, they spell out for a jury why they believe he's the man responsible for this heinous crime.
He had plans, and those plans didn't involve Ardina Carter, and it certainly didn't involve being a father.
Instead of him being a man, he chose another way out.
He killed her and went on about his life as if nothing had happened.
Michael Natson was found guilty and was sentenced to serve 3 life sentences without possibility of parole.
The verdict, and we say, yes, we got him.
Dina's mom afterwards gave me the biggest hug and told me that I'd given her daughter back to her. To have a mom say that, as you can tell, to this day, a decade later. Remember it forever.
Although Dina's family suffered an unimaginable loss, they continue to celebrate the bright, beautiful woman she was throughout her all-too-brief life. July 28, 2010. It's just past midnight on Nantucket Island, a picturesque tourist haven off the coast of Massachusetts. Most folks are peacefully sleeping, but Vivian Walker is in the throes of a horrific nightmare.
I had this dream, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
In her dream, Vivian is walking through a dark, wooded place, and then all of a sudden, she hears a scream.
She realizes the voice is that of her daughter, 23-year-old Trudy Hall.
I could hear her screaming in the night, like something happened to my child. I woke up, then my spine started hurting me. As mother, something goes wrong, you know.
Smart, fearless, and full of life, Nantucket resident Trudy Hall saw the world as her oyster.
She was like a go-getter. She was like, okay, then you want to do something, come, I'll show you.
Her ability to
take things head on and not being scared. I think that's what I love the most.
Her laugh and her smile was so bright, and Trudy was someone that I saw myself looking up to when I was older.
After graduating high school in 2005, advice from her mother, Vivian, led Trudy to her true calling.
I told her, why not go into medicine? You always guarantee you have a job.
She attended Cape Cod Community College.
She became a nursing assistant.
As Trudy's nursing career began falling into place, so did the other pieces of her life. In 2009, the ambitious 22-year-old caught the eye of another Nantucket resident, a hardworking Nepalese immigrant named Raj Ramani.
Trudy.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
Good. Raj was 41 years old. He'd immigrated to the United States in 2004 and had worked at a restaurant.
Despite their 2-decade age difference, Trudy and Raj formed a fast connection. So much so that a few months after Trudy and Raj first met, they decided to tie the knot.
They had a small wedding and a reception.
Though Trudy's family was pretty surprised at how quickly the relationship had progressed, she was happy, and that was all they really wanted.
Then in the spring of 2010, these newlyweds got another piece of good news.
She has this glow to her. So I was waiting on her to tell me that she's pregnant. But I knew she was pregnant.
I think she would be a great parent, not even just a parent, but a best friend also.
In late July, Trudy and Raj flew from Nantucket to Cape Cod for Trudy's 4-month checkup. It was scheduled for early the next morning.
It seemed like a joyous time in their lives and their future. I mean, the possibilities were endless.
But in the early morning hours of July 28th, Trudy's mother is tormented by a horrific nightmare.
I said, no, something is wrong.
Around 6 a.m., Vivian starts texting Trudy.
I texted her. I said, remember your appointment, you got to start driving. She didn't text back. That's unlike her.
Minutes turn to hours, and Vivian's worries continue to mount. Then, at 9 a.m., a call comes in from Trudy's husband, Raj, and Vivian breathes a momentary sigh of relief.
Hello, Raj. She assumed he was calling to check in for his wife and tell her about the appointment.
But little did Vivian know, the nightmare she awoke from earlier that morning is about to become a terrifying reality.
Raj actually tells her when he woke up this morning, his wife had disappeared.
I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
3-year-old Nantucket resident Trudy Hall, the summer of 2010 was shaping up to be life-changing.
Trudy and her husband, Raj, had just been married, and now they were looking forward to the upcoming birth of her first child. And on top of that, she had just graduated from Cape Cod Community College and was about to embark upon a career in the healthcare industry.
But in the early morning hours of July 28th, what began as a routine trip to Cape Cod for a prenatal exam devolved into a nightmare for Trudy's loved ones.
I had a dream, and I could hear her screaming. So the morning when I woke up, I texted her. She didn't text back.
Later that morning, Vivian gets a call from Trudy's husband, Raj, but he has some troubling news.
He said, Mom, didn't see Trudy. She's not there.
Vivian and Raj immediately report her missing to the Barnstable police on Cape Cod.
When was the last time you saw your wife?
Last night at our hotel room.
And you've been trying to reach her all day?
Yes, we both have. And I'm so concerned about her because she's pregnant.
Tell you what, would you be okay if we spoke with Mr. Ramani privately just to narrow down details of the last time you saw your daughter?
Well, yeah, I mean...
Bring you right back in.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'll be right outside.
Speaking with investigators, Raj explains that he and Trudy's trip to Cape Cod had also been a mini getaway for the couple.
They rent a Toyota Avalon around 5:30 p.m. They had checked into the Bayside Resort. They went to Cape Cod Mall, they grabbed some food, they saw a movie, made a nice evening of it.
So, Mr. Ramani, what time did you get back to the hotel?
About 8:30, 9 o'clock.
And after that, did you go to bed?
I did. Trudy said she needed to go out to get some medical photocopies made.
Trudy asked Raj to go with her to make some photocopies. He said he was too tired and didn't go.
I tried to wait up for her, but I was pretty exhausted. And I fell asleep watching TV.
So after you had woken up, you didn't realize that she hadn't come back?
Well, not exactly. We were staying in separate rooms, so I knocked on her door around 7 a.m. and she didn't answer.
When Raj checked the parking lot, the couple's rental car was gone.
At that point, he alerted the hotel staff and they went to check on her. They found her belongings, but she was not there and her phone also was not there. He called several times, no response.
That's when I called my mother-in-law.
As investigators listen to Raj's account, they alert their colleagues to be on the lookout for Trudy's missing vehicle.
But as the search for Trudy amps up, investigators are baffled by one aspect of Raj's statement.
We were staying in separate rooms.
Why would a new, happily married couple check in 2 different rooms at a hotel?
It would seem odd that maybe there was some discord in the relationship.
Was there a reason why you stayed in separate rooms?
I smoke. She's pregnant. That's not good for the baby.
What about home? You share the same bedroom?
Actually, we don't live together. I live alone. Trudy has a roommate.
Raj tells police that cohabitation really didn't make sense for the two of them. They maintained separate residences because they each had leases that they didn't want to breach.
If you are experiencing problems in your marriage, now's the time to tell us.
We weren't. We were fine. I promise.
He said he was deeply in love with his wife and was extremely concerned about her whereabouts.
On one hand, Raj seems sincere, but let's be real honest here. What newly married couple stays in separate hotel rooms and lives apart? It seems like Raj is not telling the whole story, but at this point, there's no proof of foul play.
That afternoon, Barnstable detectives, accompanied by the Massachusetts State Police, talked to Trudy's roommate, a young woman named Michelle Thomas, to see if she can provide any additional information.
Have you talked to her in the past 24 hours?
No, we weren't really that close.
Trudy Hall's roommate told police that Trudy mostly kept to herself, either talking on the phone or surfing the internet.
But when detectives bring up Trudy's husband, Raj Ramani, the conversation gets interesting.
What about her husband? Did you know him at all, or?
I met him maybe twice, but it wasn't exactly what you'd call a normal relationship.
Care to shed some light on that?
Then she drops a bombshell.
It was a sham marriage.
She claims that Raj Ramani paid Trudy $20,000 for their October 2009 marriage.
Michelle couldn't provide proof for any of these claims, but she was sure the marriage was a sham just to get Raj citizenship.
But according to Michelle, Trudy's alleged fraudulent marriage to Raj isn't even the half of it.
She said Trudy was married not once, but twice.
In fact, Michelle says Trudy was still married to her first husband.
They were married in April of 2009. Later on that year, she married Raj Ramani in another county, also in Massachusetts.
Now, this is a truly crazy twist to the story. If she had married multiple men for money, like the roommate is alleging, not only is this marriage fraud, but it's bigamy as well.
The possibility of bigamy opens up a whole Pandora's box of suspects in this case.
Detectives can't help but wonder, is this the case of a woman on the run? Or maybe someone who had bit off one marriage too many? What Trudy's roommate tells detectives next will take an already shocking case to a whole new level.
There was so much more going on beneath the surface. This was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was strange. I didn't really understand it.
When Barnstable and Massachusetts State Police sit down with Trudy Hall's roommate, Michelle Thomas, they never could have imagined the shocking secrets that were waiting to be exposed.
She tells police that Trudy would marry immigrants to the United States in exchange for large amounts of cash.
According to Michelle, Trudy had married Raj Ramani in a sham marriage. She'd been married before, and she was still married to the guy.
Her first husband was Dewan McDowell. They were married in April of 2009.
And Michelle insists Trudy hadn't married Dewan for love either.
He was a Jamaican immigrant. He worked as a ceiling plasterer.
The roommate claimed that Trudy Hall accepted money for the marriage.
Marriage fraud for the purpose of immigration is a federal crime in the first place. But if you stir bigamy into the pot, which is a felony in Massachusetts, you're looking at even more major charges.
Wasn't she scared of getting caught?
Absolutely. And if you ask me, I bet she took a run for it before all the situation caught up with her.
With Michelle's statement in tow, detectives issue a statewide BOLO for anyone matching Trudy's description. They also initiate a deeper dive into her background.
After a search of Trudy Hall's marriage records, it was discovered that Dewan married Trudy in Barnstable County. Trudy later married Raj Ramani in Plymouth County. There was no linkage of the marriage records across counties, and that's why the bigamy wasn't officially discovered.
When police approach Trudy's mother with this information, she's blown away.
Did you know about Trudy's previous marriage?
I was so surprised. I was like, really?
This was very confusing to her mother and at a very troubling time.
No, she would never do anything like that.
Despite this shocking revelation, Vivian insists her daughter would never run away, no matter how much legal trouble she might be in. With the statewide BOLO proving ineffective, investigators broaden their record search and dig up some even juicier details.
According to officials with the Nantucket Family Court, Trudy had inquired about divorce proceedings in early July 2010. She was scheduled to meet with a Nantucket divorce attorney on July 28th.
On the night of July 27th, she disappeared.
Although nothing in the records suggests which husband Trudy intended to divorce, both Raj Ramani and Dewan McDowell stood to lose everything if Trudy left them.
If you marry a U.S. citizen, you have to stay married for at least 5 years for you to gain U.S. citizenship yourself.
Could a potential divorce have jeopardized their residency status?
While police try to track down Trudy's first husband, Dewan McDowell, investigators ask husband number 2, Raj Ramani, to come back in for another round of questioning.
All right, Raj. It's time to come clean, all right? Just tell us the truth, okay?
I'm not lying. I love my wife.
You think she felt the same way?
Yes.
So what if I told you she was married to somebody else?
What?
Yeah. She was about to file for divorce.
From me?
I don't know, you tell us.
Raj seemed shocked by these revelations.
So you think this guy could be the father of her baby?
We thought you were the father, Raj.
I should have been.
Raj admitted to police that he knew he wasn't the father of Trudy's baby. She had come clean about that early in their marriage. But she never told him who the real father was. And she certainly never admitted that she was married to someone else.
Could all of this have been a reason for Raj to commit foul play?
Raj, given the circumstances, it would be understandable, you know, if you just snapped.
I didn't hurt my wife. I loved her. And the baby. Even if it isn't mine.
Despite his claims of innocence, detectives can't shake one detail about Raj's story.
Raj was the last person, presumably, to see Trudy alive.
And he basically had no alibi, except he was asleep in a room down the hall from where she disappeared.
But with no other evidence pointing Raj's way, and with no proof that Trudy's dead or alive, police are forced to let him go once again.
Less than 24 hours later, a Barnstable police officer makes a startling discovery.
This officer was aware of Trudy's BOLO, and he decided to check a commuter lot. And as he was driving through the parking lot, he saw a car that caught his attention.
The officer found the Toyota Avalon that Raj Ramani and Trudy Hall had rented.
That was parked in a particular area that was tucked away, so to speak, from the rest of the cars.
The BOLO earlier on the silver car, I believe I've got it.
The officer radios his finding back to dispatch, and within the hour, detectives arrive on the scene.
It was, for lack of a better description, a very bloody scene.
There were bone fragments, human tissue, and a .38 caliber round lodged inside the car.
Police knew they were probably looking at a homicide case.
2 fingerprints were found on the grill of the car. They appeared to be bloody.
Will this lead to Trudy's abductor? Or is this just another new piece of the puzzle that is already getting more complex by the day?
The discovery of 23-year-old Trudy Hall's blood-stained rental car has turned a missing persons case on the quiet peninsula of Cape Cod into a potential homicide. Barnstable and Massachusetts State Police are working together in hopes that physical evidence found on Trudy's rental car may be the key to finding her assailant.
2 fingerprints were found on the grill of the car. They appeared to be bloody.
Investigators run the prints through their database, but their hopes are quickly dashed.
The fingerprint ends up not matching anybody.
The limited clues found in the vehicle didn't give police any clearer idea of what transpired or who was responsible. It could have been one of her 2 husbands or someone else who knew her. Of course, it could have just been a random abduction.
With the facts of the case still uncertain, police ramp up their search for Trudy Hall.
The Massachusetts State Police and the Barnstable Police conducted a massive search. They basically started searching the wooded areas near the commuter lot.
They search and search and search, but no luck.
Though the search for Trudy is ongoing, that afternoon, investigators sit down with Trudy's other husband, DeJuan McDowell.
DeJuan McDowell was a 31-year-old Jamaican immigrant who worked as a ceiling plasterer on Nantucket.
They went to DeJuan seeking answers, but as it turns out, he was very concerned. He was very upset that Trudy had gone missing.
When was the last time you saw Trudy?
Yeah, it's been a minute. Maybe a month. Man, I can't believe this happened.
Can you tell us where you were on July 27th and 28th?
He contends that he was working on Nantucket Island the last, 2 days that she had been seen alive. There are a lot of questions here. Did he know she was seeking out a divorce? Did he know anything about this second marriage? If he did, perhaps was he jealous that she had married again?
It's been brought to our attention that Trudy was pregnant. Do you know if you were the father?
No.
DeJuan tells detectives in no uncertain terms that he is not the father of Trudy's baby. But he says it's no big deal. They had recently become estranged, and he harbored no ill will towards her.
When pressed by detectives, DeJuan also denies allegations that his marriage to Trudy was a sham.
While DeJuan's reaction seems genuine, investigators are a little apprehensive because he had time to formulate a story, so they intend to check out his alibis.
In the meantime, detectives turn to Trudy's phone records from the night of her disappearance. Immediately, they identify a series of calls that merits investigation.
Leading up to her disappearance, she had been having phone correspondence of some type with Quizelle Wilson.
But who is Quizelle Wilson? Later that night, investigators pay a visit to the Cape Cod home 32-year-old Quizelle shares with his wife, Denise.
Police went over there. Both he and his wife, they were asleep.
He comes out on the porch. His wife is there, and they just ask him a few questions.
Do you know a woman by the name of Trudy Hall?
Yeah, I know Trudy. We know Trudy.
He says they attended church together on Nantucket.
Are you aware that she is missing?
Since when?
Since July 27th.
The 27th, I saw her that day.
Quizelle did admit that he had helped Trudy move some belongings into her hotel room at the Bayside Resort on July 27th.
She had given me a call. I was in the area, said she needed my help. So I did that. Then afterwards, I got some fast food, came back home.
And he said he stayed there the rest of the night.
So that would put you home at what time?
Probably about 8 o'clock.
They asked, was there a sexual relationship going on? He adamantly denies it.
I would assume that you knew she was pregnant.
Yeah, we knew she was pregnant. She was excited about the baby, couldn't wait for it to come.
Any idea on who the father would be?
know, but I mean, I would assume that it was her husband, you know.
The following morning, police interview parishioners from the church Trudy and Quizelle both attended in hopes of obtaining further insight into their relationship.
There was no indication that Trudy and Quizelle were involved. Everyone thought they were just friends, and Quizelle Wilson seemed to be a happily married man.
Wilson had moved from Nantucket to Cape Cod. He bought a house and was working as a truck driver.
But as police continue to dig, their search reveals Quizelle has a criminal past.
In November of 2008, he worked as a manager for the Nantucket Island Transit Authority. He was arrested and accused of stealing $8,000. He accepted a plea agreement where he was given a 2-year suspended jail sentence and ordered to pay restitution.
And there's one other unsettling detail about Quizelle's previous run-in with the law.
During that arrest, he was also charged with having an unsecured handgun in the vehicle.
It made them think of the bullets that they found in Trudy's rental car.
When police obtain Quizelle's phone records, they find out he hasn't been completely truthful with them.
Quizelle told police he was home by 8 p.m. the night of Trudy's disappearance, but police see a call to Quizelle's wife around 10:15 p.m.
And his phone was pinging 5 miles from his house at the service road between exits 4 and 5 west.
Investigators decide it's time to re-interview Quizelle Wilson. But on the morning of August 3rd, he beats them to the punch.
Quizelle Wilson requested a second interview with the Barnstable police.
Quizelle admits he hasn't been completely honest with police. When they ask why, he says the answer is obvious.
I was on the spot. Your wife did? Yeah. January or February, we started seeing each other. So you had a second relationship? Yeah.
Quizelle said he would see Trudy about twice a week at the hotel.
Now, did your wife know you would meet up with her? No.
Police again press Quizelle on whether or not Trudy's baby might be his.
Well, on one time, the condom did break. Did you guys ever talk about an abortion after that? A couple times. I told her, it's gonna mess up home, but eventually said she's not going to. So I was like, okay, let's try to keep it a secret as long as we can.
He admitted this baby would cause serious problems with his relationship with his wife.
When police ask Quizelle whether he owns any firearms, his answer raises red flags.
He does admit he owns a 9mm, but that the 9mm had been stolen.
When did your gun get stolen? It's either November or December of 2008. Did you ever report that gun stolen? No.
As for Quizelle's visit to Trudy's hotel room on July 27th, he admits the couple did more than just move luggage that day.
He did indicate that they engaged in sexual relations at the motel.
Quizelle says their liaison occurred around 6 p.m. that night, and afterwards he left the hotel and drove home.
Quizelle is adamant that Trudy was alive and well when he left her hotel room and that he had nothing to do with harming her.
The problem with this story is that police have his cell phone records, and they contradict his claim. He wasn't home that night.
Caught in a lie, Quizelle is now at the top of investigators' list of suspects. But as detectives put the screws to Quizelle, Trudy's family turns to a more spiritual search for the truth.
I said, God, you do this. You run this investigation.
In his second interview with investigators, Quizelle Wilson has come clean about his extramarital affair with 23-year-old Trudy Hall, who was missing and presumed dead.
Quizelle admits that he was involved sexually with Trudy Hall. He did also admit that they had a sexual encounter on the night of July 27th.
But Quizelle claims he left Trudy alive and well in her hotel room before heading home that night. There's just one problem. Cell phone records prove he's lying.
Quizelle's phone records and admitted affair with Trudy Hall gives investigators the probable cause they need to secure a search warrant of Quizelle Wilson's home.
On August 5th, 2010, Police execute that warrant.
They found cleaning supplies for a 9mm pistol and receipts for purchase of that pistol.
They took several items of clothing, including jackets, belts, pants, things of that sort. His Nissan Armada, they brought it to their laboratories to look to see if they could find any sort of indications of Ms. Hall being on any of those items, specifically her blood.
At the police station, he drank some coffee in the interview room, and the police seized the cup to possibly use for DNA.
They wanted to see if it matched any DNA that might ultimately be found in Trudy's rental car.
They gathered all of that evidence, and after the battery of tests that were put forth on all of those items, came back negative.
None of it ties Quazell to Trudy's disappearance.
Months pass, and the case languishes. For Trudy's family, the pain becomes unbearable.
You don't understand fully what's happening, and you're left out of so much.
I have to go to sleepless night. We have been through hell.
It was just hard to see my mom going through so much pain.
To see my mom cry almost every day. As a son, you never want to see that.
And the more Vivian suffers, the more she dreams of her missing daughter.
I said, I'm searching for you. Where have you been? And she said, I am where they put me. I am between two trees. I start praying. I said, God, just let somebody find her.
Ultimately, the case goes cold. But even as the seasons pass, Vivian's dreams persist, and she refuses to give up on the search for her daughter.
I still have hope, because the good thing is that God always be there for me and my family, and I trust him.
The family also hired a private investigator, and there was the $15,000 reward for information leading to a conviction.
Finally, in the spring of 2012, there's a development that could be the answer to Vivian's prayers.
April 12th of 2012, skeletal remains have been found by a man near Hayward Road.
It was a pretty wooded, isolated area about 15 miles from where Trudy's car was found.
The man picked up the skull thinking it belonged to an animal, but once he saw teeth, he knew it was a human skull.
Police are notified immediately. Minutes later, they arrive on the scene.
Investigators begin to examine the scattered remains. And sure enough, they're human and likely a female, and one who was pregnant.
At this point, I think everybody's gut was probably telling them these were the remains of Trudy Hall and her unborn child.
The police, over the phone, they said to me, do you have a picture of her smiling? And I said, you want a picture? I'll bring it.
Standing in this remote wooded area, a chill runs down Vivian's spine.
I said, it's her because I had this vision about two trees, and the two trees are right there. She's right there.
When the photo is compared with the victim's skeletal remains, it confirms the terrible truth.
She has a little gap in between her teeth, so that's her.
It was Trudy Hall.
I said, thank you, God, I found her remains. You know, at least I found her.
Trudy's remains are transported to the Massachusetts State Medical Examiner's office. A few days later, they issue the formal cause of death.
She was shot 8 to 9 times in the torso.
DNA testing is also conducted on the fetal bones found alongside Trudy's body in hopes of identifying the father.
Detectives didn't know if it would be Raj Ramani, DeJuan McDowell, Quazell Wilson, or someone else.
And look who the father is.
Quazell ended up being the father of Trudy's unborn child.
And as investigators continue to search the area where Trudy was murdered, the case against Quazell continues to mount.
There were multiple .38 caliber projectiles found at the scene.
Police determined that the 9mm gun Quazell admitted he once owned could have fired these .38 caliber bullets.
But perhaps it's the crime scene itself that provides the most intriguing piece of evidence.
After finding Trudy's burial site, police went back to the cell phone records again.
At 10:45 p.m., Quazell's phone pings off of Route 28,
which is approaching the site where Trudy's remains were found.
This is just too big of a coincidence, given how remote the location was.
At the same time, phone records also help eliminate Trudy's two husbands, Raj Ramani and Dewan McDowell, as suspects.
But one loose end still remains: the two bloody fingerprints found on Trudy's rental car.
The initial time they put into a computer system to try to determine whose fingerprints they were, they didn't have any hits. They resubmitted those prints and came up with a hit.
It's been 2 years since 23-year-old mother-to-be Trudy Hall vanished into thin air. Investigators have identified Trudy's lover, Quizelle Wilson, as the prime suspect in her murder.
You've got phone records from the night of Trudy's disappearance that pinged very close to where the remains of Trudy were found. DNA evidence has also determined that he was very likely the father of the baby. 38 caliber shell casings were found near the remains, a very close match with the 9mm gun that Quizelle used to own.
With all other evidence pointing to Quizelle's guilt, authorities have one loose end to tie up: the smudge of fingerprints found on Trudy's abandoned rental car.
The initial time they recovered those fingerprints, they didn't have any hits. They resubmitted those prints through the computer systems again about 2 years later and came up with a hit.
A hit for a man named Sammy Nelson.
It turns out that Sammy Nelson is a 50-year-old Cape Cod resident.
Detectives aren't sure why the fingerprint hit this time and not the time before.
It's like, who is this guy? Could he be an accomplice? Is he the true mastermind? Could Quizelle Wilson actually be innocent?
But when Sammy sits down with investigators a few days later, he not only denies knowing Quizelle Wilson, but claims he's never heard of Trudy Hall either.
What if I told you that this woman was murdered and your fingerprints were found on the grill of her rental car?
What? I ain't killed nobody.
Sammy remains adamant he has no idea how his fingerprints ended up on Trudy's vehicle.
He gives 4 interviews in May of 2012 and at no point mentions anything about putting his hand on the grill of that car.
But in November of 2012, during his 5th and final interview, Sammy Nelson recalls one detail he'd previously overlooked.
July 27th, 2010, I was with my family early in the morning, and we stopped at a convenience store over in Hyannis.
Hyannis is one of the villages that dot Barnstable.
He came out of a store and stabilized himself by putting his hand on the car.
Did you see any blood on the car at all when you touched it?
No, I did not.
So what Sammy was suggesting was that yes, he might have rested his hand on Trudy's rental car, but whatever blood police found must have gotten there afterwards.
Would you be willing to take a polygraph exam, sir?
Of course, yes.
Police had their doubts that Sammy was telling the truth, but he passed the test with flying colors.
Unlike Quizelle Wilson, Sammy had no background with Trudy Hall, and detectives couldn't find any motive to murder her.
In November of 2013, prosecutors charged Quizelle Wilson with the murder of Trudy Hall.
Since Trudy was only 4.5 months pregnant, they couldn't add on the charge for murder of an unborn child.
For Trudy's family, Quizelle's arrest is difficult but welcome news.
I was kind of surprised because these are people that I know that goes to church. I said, God, just put him away for life, that it does not come out.
I was just hoping for the conviction, and I wanted to get it over with.
On May 4th, 2015, Quizelle Wilson appears in front of a Barnstable Superior Court jury.
I just didn't like seeing him because you could see there was like a smirk on his face. Like he thought he was going to get away with something.
In their opening statements, prosecutors portray Quizelle as a cheating husband who would do anything to keep his affair with Trudy and her pregnancy a secret. Then, using data from Trudy and Quizelle's cell phones, prosecutors spell out what they believe happened the night of July 27, 2010.
After Quizelle and Trudy hooked up in her hotel room at about 6 o'clock that night, she then went to see a movie and went to dinner with Raj. She got back to the hotel about 8:30 or 9, and then left again to meet Quizelle at about 9:45 in a commuter lot.
Quizelle's phone pings, and Trudy's phone also pings to that same location.
Move over. I'll drive.
Okay. Then they drove west on the service road toward Route 28. At that time, 10:15 p.m., Quizelle's phone pings on a service road. Trudy's phone also pings to that same location on Route 28. They ended up pulling over, and an argument ensued.
What's wrong? You seem angry.
That damn baby in your stomach.
You mean our baby?
Well, it's my problem when my wife finds out.
Well, you should have thought about that before we had sex.
Prosecutors believe that's when Quizelle acted.
Quizelle shot Trudy Hall in the torso. Then he drives her body south on Route 28 to Hayway Road, and that's where he dumps her body.
He returned back to the commuter lot approximately 11:30, then took his car back home. He was home by 12:30 a.m.
On May 15th, a Barnstable Superior Court jury finds Quizelle Wilson guilty of first-degree murder.
I knew once he was convicted, I could be able to move on. It was relief.
He was sentenced to Walpole State Prison for a term of life, no parole.
You can't take an innocent life and be set free.
There is no sin that goes unpunished in this earth. You know, the police did their work. He will not see the light of day again. And I get this peace.
Though nothing will ever bring back Trudy Hall or her unborn child, her mother Vivian remains steadfast in her faith. After 5.5 years together, 25-year-old Keosha Gilmore and 34-year-old Michael Ferguson had big plans for their future.
She was in love with, and he was in love with her.
She really cared for him. They decided to be committed to each other when they decided to move in together.
She was planning a life with Mike.
But on February 19th, 2012, the unthinkable happens. Keosha is shot twice, right in front of Michael's mother, Cynthia Ferguson's home, and is teetering on the brink of death.
They told me that Keosha was shot. I didn't know to what extent. All I know is I got sick and overwhelmed.
Based on the initial reports from the Boston Medical Services technicians, we felt that she would have a very small chance of survival.
From that moment in time, as soon as the nature of the injuries were established and realized, Boston police detectives from the homicide unit were contacted and responded.
As Keosha is rushed to the hospital, Boston detectives arrive at the scene.
I got a basic lay of the land of what was present there when I arrived.
There was shattered glass on the ground, the victim's pocketbook, and on the sidewalk there was matter from the victim from her injuries.
With Keosha's boyfriend, Michael Ferguson, on his way to the hospital with her, detectives begin looking for other potential witnesses.
And this is a very residential area, so there's no video cameras or surveillance cameras. We have to really rely on the people who are there to provide us the information we need to keep moving forward.
Asking people what they heard, what they might have seen, all sorts of questions like that.
Now, you said you were inside the house when the shooting happened?
Correct.
Tell me about it.
I was in the home, and my son ran in, and I told me to call 911.
Okay.
And I came outside, and he was there with Keosha. And that's all I saw.
You didn't hear anything or see anything suspicious?
No, I did not.
All right.
Cynthia Ferguson's statement is one that's echoed in interviews with others in the area.
The neighbors told police that they heard the gunshots. They didn't see anything.
With the interviews yielding little in the way of actionable intel, detectives decide to pay a visit to their only known eyewitness, 34-year-old Michael Ferguson.
When I first went to the hospital, I saw how broken he was. Man, that dude was devastated.
He was a mess. He was absolutely, totally distraught. More distraught than most people I've ever talked to.
Look, Michael, I know it's been a long, hard night, but we need you to try to think of everything that you possibly can to help us out with this.
God, I don't know it all happened so fast. Let's start from the beginning.
Michael had picked her up from work. They went to a local gas station to pick something up, and then they pulled in front of Michael's house and were having a conversation.
I had so many funny people come in today into the store and like all kind of.
He noticed a person walking down the street with a hoodie on, coming towards him, didn't really pay him any attention because it was just a person walking by.
I can hook you up with some new phones.
He raised the gun, pointed it, and fired 2 shots.
Michael is in his seat. He doesn't know what's happening. He looks up and his girlfriend is now slumped over in the seat. He gets out of the car and he actually can see a figure running off across the street.
The assailant then ran away into the New Calvary Cemetery, which abuts Alabama Street in Mattapan, and disappeared.
While it sounds like Michael is lucky to be alive, investigators can't help but wonder how he managed to escape the attack.
We didn't know what was going on with Michael and the fact that he wasn't injured.
Obviously, when somebody is killed, oftentimes it is a person who knows them. By ordinary and sensible police work, they of course would look at the boyfriend and look at the facts and circumstances to determine whether or not he would be a suspect.
We looked at this situation and said, how does someone walk up, shoot her in the head and the shoulder, and not even fire a round in his direction?
Still, with no other witnesses or leads, detectives must take Michael's statement at face value.
Once we had gotten that information, I had requested the K-9 officers to come down to the location and take a look around to see if we could find any additional evidence or suspect.
Will police find evidence to support Michael's story? Or will it be exposed as a lie designed to conceal a far more haunting version of events?
Something inside of me was just like, he knows something or he saw something.
It's been hours since 25-year-old Keosha Gilmore was shot outside her boyfriend's mother's residence in Mattapan, Massachusetts.
The chances of her surviving were slim to none. I mean, they'd given us details. It was bad.
But detectives are already following up on a possible lead provided by Keosha's longtime boyfriend, Michael Ferguson.
Keosha's boyfriend alerted the police that the assailant came around, fired the shots into the car, and then ran off and ran across the street and into the New Calvary Cemetery.
Shortly thereafter, a K-9 officer came to the scene.
The K-9 locked onto a scent and directed its handler away from the crime scene.
She was able to get her dog over a kind of maybe a 5-foot, 6-foot stone wall that led into the New Calvary Cemetery.
That K-9 found 2 bags, and sticking out of one of those bags was a 6-shot revolver, and inside of the other bag was 2 latex gloves and a hat and a water bottle.
It appears that this is probably more likely than not going to be our weapon.
The K-9 unit tracked the scent from where the backpacks were over to an area just beyond the cemetery to a backyard on a street that ran along the backside of the cemetery.
That's where the trail kind of got lost. We searched that entire area, but we weren't able to find anyone.
For now, Keosha's assailant has managed to evade police. But the evidence he left behind sheds important new light on the shooting.
Given the way this shooting happened, where the person walked up, shot her, did not shoot at Michael Ferguson, we immediately realized that this was a targeted event. This was not a case of someone being a victim of robbery. This was not a case of a random act of violence.
This path that the killer took was the one path where he could run away and not worry about getting caught and not worry about getting seen and put a lot of distance between himself and the scene of the crime.
It appeared that something was going on and that these people, one or the other, was the intended target.
The question was, who would do this?
As detectives ponder this question, they receive heartbreaking confirmation from the hospital.
She was in the hospital for about a day, maybe a bit less. At around 4 o'clock on February 20th, 2012, she passed.
It was very weakening to know that we couldn't stop it from happening. We couldn't stop her from dying.
The loss of Keosha left me broken.
It was devastating because you don't think it would ever happen to you.
With the case now officially a homicide, investigators are more motivated than ever to get justice for Keosha's family.
We wanted to see if maybe we could find some fingerprints. We wanted to see what was going on with the firearm itself. And of course, any DNA evidence that may come up from the hat or the rubber glove would have been significant.
Detectives send the evidence off for processing. It's not long before the results come back.
The crime lab processed the items and found that there were DNA profiles on a number of the items from the backpacks.
They determined that the DNA from each of those items came from, for the better part, a single source. And the single source contributor of that DNA was one particular person. The question became, well, who is the contributor of that DNA? Who is the person who had carried these items into the cemetery?
Investigators scour their DNA database looking for a possible match.
The problem with the DNA profiles is that the person has to be in the system for us to be able to match them and identify them.
Unfortunately, there are no matches in the DNA database.
We couldn't narrow the assailant down because he either didn't have a record or hadn't yet submitted, a DNA profile following a felony conviction in Massachusetts.
And while Michael Ferguson's statement directed investigators to some critical evidence, the fact remains that he is the crime's only witness and its sole survivor.
Whenever you see a situation like this, you have to take a look at the boyfriend.
That's the first place you look because he's sitting just inches away in the car and he doesn't get shot. She does. What was the relationship between Michael and Keosha? Were they having difficult times? Was there something there? Was he jealous of her? Was something going on?
Detectives reach out to Michael for a second interview, hoping he will consent to more than just some routine questioning.
Their hope is that he will let them swab him for some of his DNA.
That DNA was hanging out there. It's almost like a tripwire.
But will this be the missing piece detectives need to catch Keosha's killer?
We didn't know what we had. None of it really made sense.
In the suburbs just south of Boston, police are on the hunt for the person responsible for the brutal slaying of 25-year-old Keosha Gilmore.
They've been able to build a DNA profile off of the weapon they found near the crime scene, but it isn't a match to anyone in the DNA database.
Now, detectives are circling back to the sole survivor of the attack, Keosha's live-in boyfriend, Michael Ferguson.
It's hard to explain why somebody would shoot and kill a 25-year-old woman who's just sitting in her car with her boyfriend, if the boyfriend had nothing to do with it.
While Michael seemed genuinely devastated by Keosha's death, maybe there was something more to the story.
Armed with the results of the DNA analysis, detectives sit down with Michael for a formal interview.
Their hope is to get more information from him, but they're also hoping that he will voluntarily give them a DNA sample.
Michael, I want you to know we're going to do everything in our power to catch Keosha's killer. But in order to do that, I need to know everything about your relationship with her. You understand?
Yes.
Okay. So did y'all have any problems at all?
No, she was my soulmate.
It's then that Michael offers up some additional information that adds a tragic new layer to Michael's sorrow.
I don't know if it's relevant, but Keosha and I got engaged a couple months back.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm supposed to get married today.
Keosha got shot on Sunday. She passed on Monday, but it was actually that Tuesday that they was gonna surprise me and my wife and, get married at the Justice of Peace.
That's when Michael Ferguson makes another startling admission.
He was concerned that perhaps she was killed as a result of his past.
He had a bit of a checkered past, involved in a couple of different things.
There's nothing really. Ran with the wrong crowd when I was younger, but I got out of that before I messed my life up. Only thing is, someone weren't too happy about it.
The violence that takes place in Mattapan, a lot of it has to do with the gangs.
We immediately began thinking, is this a case where someone's trying to get a point across to him? We asked about people from his past that could be upset with him. Was there an old beef? Was there some situation from his life that someone was sending a message to him?
Michael tells police that only a few weeks earlier, he had a run-in with one of the toughest guys from his old crowd, a man named Jamal Thomas, who wasn't pleased that Michael had chosen the straight and narrow over the street life.
Oh, well, look who the hell it is. What's happening, man? You forgot about your boys?
Nah, man, like I told you before, I'm out that life. About to get married, man.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So you think you better than us now, huh? Or maybe you just need a little reminder of who you really are.
Look, man, I don't want no trouble.
Yeah. Better watch your back, man. Don't turn on family.
He felt that someone was coming after him, and this was their way to send a message to him.
We didn't know, could it possibly he had been the intended target?
While Michael has been nothing but cooperative so far, detectives can't officially remove him from their list of potential suspects until he supplies them with a sample of his DNA.
Michael was asked to provide a DNA sample to see if it was a match for the DNA found on the killer's belongings, and he readily agreed to do so.
The boyfriend's DNA profile did not match the assailant's profile.
There was no forensic evidence or evidence whatsoever which would suggest that that boyfriend had committed the crime or had anything to do with it.
The physical evidence, his reporting of the crime, his description of how it occurred, checked out. And therefore, while, you don't draw any immediate firm conclusions, the evidence suggested he was not the assailant.
Following Michael's lead, detectives track down Jamal Thomas and bring him in for questioning. But after speaking with Jamal, detectives realize they've reached another dead end.
There was nothing that came forward that led us to believe there was anything else to pursue.
With the lead from Michael's past proving fruitless, detectives turn their attention to Kiyosh's personal life.
We had to look at who's in her circle. Is this a disgruntled lover? Is this somebody at work? Is this, somebody that she's been beefing with?
Hoping to learn more about any enemies Kiyosha might potentially have, detectives turn to her grieving family.
Herman and Gloria were racking their brains to think of anything they could possibly give us, to give us something to look at, something to chase down.
There was nothing in her life that I was aware of that was alarming for someone to take her life.
Everybody that knew Kiyosha or anybody that she hung out with, they were straight up and up people, We never worried about Kiyosha being involved with drugs or partying, so it was totally mind-blowing. Like, who would do this?
After several weeks with no concrete leads, detectives reach out to Kiyosha's employer to see if she'd been in conflict with any of her coworkers. By doing so, they learn of an alarming incident that happened not long before the shooting.
There was a person, I think, that was selling drugs through the store, and Kiyosha was caught in the middle of this person being fired. We were informed of this situation, this person, and told we should look into it.
I mean, this is unacceptable. I can't have you doing this in the store.
Come on, it was outside.
It was right here. I saw you do it.
So what? What now?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
This isn't over.
Obviously, this was a huge lead. A disgruntled employee could explain why Kiyosha and not Michael was targeted in the shooting.
Could this disgruntled employee be the suspect detectives have been searching for?
He had a motive for wanting to see her deceased.
Or is there even more to this twisted story than meets the eye?
As far as murder investigations go, it really doesn't get more complicated than this.
The days following the murder of 25-year-old Kiyosha Gilmore, Boston detectives discovered that Kiyosha had recently fired an employee who she'd caught dealing drugs inside the electronics store where she was the manager.
Kiyosha was involved in in this person being fired.
Anxious to know more, detectives track him down and bring him in for questioning.
They run down this ex-employee who claims he had nothing to do with the shooting, and he willingly submits a DNA sample.
Each time we turned the DNA in, we had this hope that, okay, maybe this is it.
Nothing came back on anything involving them.
With no other suspects and no additional evidence, Keosha's case grows as cold as the Boston winter.
They had DNA evidence, they had a witness, a vague description, but it all ended there. It was like a phantom went and pulled off this crime, ran into the woods, and then completely disappeared.
We really didn't have anything else we could do until we got a break.
Though detectives continue to follow up on any potential leads, an entire year passes with no new breaks in the case. Investigators are beginning to worry Keosha's murder might never be solved.
It's a frustrating period. You know, sometimes these cases go cold for years and sometimes decades.
With detectives' best efforts still coming up short, Keosha's family decides to take matters into their own hands.
My husband had said to me, honey, we have to do something. They're kind of going cold with the case. They don't have any more leads to follow up on.
And that's when I said, you know what, we have to talk to Fox 25, Bob Ward, somebody, because we're not gonna let Keosha die without finding out who did this to her.
Bob Ward, one of our leading reporters here in town who works for the local Fox affiliate, really interested in criminal justice, public safety type of issues.
About a year after this murder, I got a phone call from Herman Weathersby, Keosha's stepfather. He explained to me that his stepdaughter was murdered, the case was going cold. Would you please come and do a story? And that's how we got involved in this case.
It aired on, I believe it was February 5th, 2013. And on February 6th, I got a phone call that basically changed the whole course of the case.
Keosha's stepmom called in on the tipster's line because she remembered some information.
The night that our story ran, Keosha's stepmother went to bed that night thinking about the case. Then all of a sudden, she had a dream about Christopher and said his name out loud. And she just wondered about Christopher. Why did that come up?
The Christopher in question was Christopher Jackson, a friend from Keosha's childhood.
They knew each other in middle school and throughout high school. Sometimes he would give her a ride to work. Sometimes he would give her a ride home. They would go out to eat, sometimes in a group setting with a couple of other friends from school.
After high school, Christopher went out of his way to keep up with Keosha's love life.
You still talking to the old guy?
Nah, he's like old news. I think he might have been jealous of you, though.
Chris doted on her, even though the relationship was platonic, and you always wondered if Chris wanted more from it.
Although Keosha clearly viewed Chris as a good guy, he always gave Keosha's stepmother an uneasy feeling.
He was getting a little possessive. He seemed like he wanted to hang out with her a lot.
She began thinking back on Christopher and Keosha growing up and remembered a bizarre incident that happened years before.
Keosha's stepmother owned a hair salon, and what she remembers clearly is that one day, Keosha was coming into work in the hair salon just for a day, just to help out. And she showed up with Chris Jackson.
Hey, hi, Keosha. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. I am so happy you're here.
Well, you know I got you covered. No worries.
Thank you. There you go.
She remembers Keosha doing all the work and Christopher sitting in a corner just watching her. And he wouldn't get up and interact. He was just sitting there watching Keosha. And that unnerved her.
She said to us, you gotta look for this guy, Chris.
This is really nothing more than a hunch. And an anecdotal story like this is not allowed to go on. But with a cold case such as this, detectives will take any lead they can get.
Though detectives know it's a long shot, they reach out to Christopher Jackson and ask him to come down to the station for an interview. Christopher agrees.
Chris, we really appreciate you coming in and talking with us today.
No problem. Glad to help any way I can.
We talked about some general things about the case and what we were trying to do, in the direction we were trying to go in, and we were trying to hold someone accountable for what happened to Keosha. He explained to us that he understood what we were trying to do, and he got it.
It's to our understanding you all were really good friends?
Best friends.
Chris was kind of an off-to-the-side guy when it came to Keosha. If she needed something, she knew that he was reliable to come pick her up, to give her a ride if she needed a ride. She would spend some time with him, going to movies or going out to dinner or something like that.
Anytime since you were kids, you start getting feelings for Keosha?
You mean like besides best friends?
Yeah, besides best friends.
No, sir.
He was a really squared away kind of kid. He was very neat. He was very respectful, a little bit awkward, but a very nice kid.
Chris, you don't mind submitting your DNA today for us, just so I can cross off the list? Of course, no problem.
We conducted an interview probably 30 or 40 minutes long and, gave us a DNA sample. I asked him, I said, if we need to talk to you again, would you talk to us again? He said, yeah, sure. Sergeant Detective Brown and I were asking each other afterwards, do you think this kid could have done it?
There was no feeling between any of us as the detectives investigating the case that this was the guy.
We went and submitted the DNA sample and said, okay, here comes another one. Where do we go next? That's kind of what we felt like at the time. We were starting to lose faith that we'd ever get the right one.
But when Keosha's killer is finally unmasked, it will leave everyone involved in this tragic case speechless.
I just can't believe that somebody could really go that far.
What really happened to that girl? And why? It's just terrible.
It was awful. It made me question people.
You killed her. Yes or no? I don't really have a yes or no answer.
February 6, 2013. It's been a year since Keosha Gilmore was gunned down in her fiancé's car. And a news story has put her old friend, 26-year-old Christopher Jackson, on investigators' radar.
We kind of want to see what his relationship was with Keosha, ask him a few questions, get that DNA sample.
But after interviewing Christopher, it seems investigators are no closer to the truth.
He didn't have any criminal record. He didn't have anything. Nothing that put him on our radar screen.
Then, in early April of 2013, the unexpected happens.
The crime lab notified Detectives Brown and McLaughlin that the DNA swab from Christopher Jackson, in fact, was a match to the DNA evidence on the material that had been found in the cemetery.
They said there's the most definite match they'd ever had because of the single source that was in the sample.
We were very surprised, to say the least. We weren't ready for it, and we had to get going and move quickly.
On April 5th, 2013, detectives asked Christopher to come in for a second interview. This time, they take a more aggressive approach when questioning him.
We put pictures out of the gun. We showed him pictures of the backpack. We showed him pictures of the hat and the contents that were in there.
Do you recognize this here? No, never seen it before.
I explained to him that we had DNA in those things and that the DNA came back to him.
He just kind of acquiesced and realized that we pretty much had him.
We asked him, what is this? Why did this happen? What brought you to this? Was there some reason? Is there something we don't understand?
You killed her. Yes or no? I don't really have a yes or no answer. It's a bad situation. But by us being able to let the family know why you did something like this, it can help bring closure down the road and potentially may change some things. I made a mistake of letting my anger overshadow my intelligence. And did this anger happen just this particular night, or was it something that kind of brewed up along the way, or how did it happen? Can you explain that to me? Depression, in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a sense of betrayal, feeling a sense of betrayal and sadness. I cared about it. I wanted to be with her at one point, but she didn't want to be with me.
He felt a sense of betrayal by Keosha. He would give her rides to work, and he would do things, and yet she didn't really reciprocate in his mind.
I was being used, but I would, in my head, I'm like, maybe at some point, she'll, start to see, start to realize that what she's doing is wrong. It was like her lack of appreciation, or her lack of, respect. Whatever. I said I couldn't give her anything. It's always a problem. I'm always wrong. I'm always, the bad guy. I can look in your eyes and I can tell by your body language that you're carrying this huge thing on your chest. And, well, yeah, of course.
thing that I'm carrying on my chest right now is the fact that I'm going to be going to jail for the rest of my life. Would you like to say a prayer right now?
I asked him if he wanted to say a prayer. I don't know why I did. I've never done that before.
Well, I'd say a prayer. Heavenly Father, rest in peace to Kiosha Gilmore. May her soul ever remain in your grace. In Jesus' heavenly name we pray. Amen. Amen.
At the end of the interview, we explained to him that he's going to be charged with the murder of Kiosha Gilmore, along with additional firearms charges.
For Kiosha's family, news of Chris's arrest is met with mixed emotions.
I was like in shock. I was just like, I cannot believe I didn't know this. I just thought he was strange. I didn't know that he was this obsessed with her.
It was like betrayal. She was your friend, and you did that to her.
As the DA prepares to take the case to trial, detectives conduct a search of Christopher's home, where they make even more unsettling discoveries.
We ended up recovering a composite notebook that had a number of his writings.
He spent a great amount of time writing about Kiosha Gilmore, about his desire for her, about how she was the love of his life, and about how he was the right man for her.
It was very clear that his obsession with Kiosha was much stronger than probably anyone had realized. And it was very clear that he had some anger about his kind of being, in his mind, used, for lack of a better word, by Kiosha. And he was kind of keeping all that anger pent up inside.
The state's theory was that Christopher Jackson had romantic feelings for a woman, a friend of his. The woman didn't share those romantic feelings and never would, and he knew it, and he became frustrated, and at some point in time, Christopher Jackson simply decided to kill her.
Those closest to Kiosha believe her engagement to Michael Ferguson was the final straw that sent Chris over the edge.
It's just my own thought that maybe she called up an old friend and shared something that was exciting to her. And I think that she probably shared it totally not knowing about the journals and how he totally felt in his mind about her. And I think he pondered on that for a little while till he had an opportunity to do something heinous.
He waited until the darkness of night, and he went up to the car that she sat in and put a bullet into her head.
On May 26, 2016, Christopher Jackson is convicted of second-degree murder. He's sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
In Massachusetts, if you're convicted of second-degree murder, it's still a life sentence, but after 15 years, you're eligible for parole.
When they came back with the verdict, I was like, are they kidding me? Like, really? He totally followed her, stalked her. It definitely was first degree. What do they think?
He put her in a box of no return. So he should stay in jail with no return.
It should have been first-degree murder. I'm disappointed. Because when you have the mask, the glove, the hat, the gun, all in your getaway path, and you walk up to the car and you know that the person's dead, you had to have followed them. You shoot them cold-bloodedly, not once, but twice. You knew what you were doing.